7:02, we'll call the meeting to order. Clerk, give a roll call.
Sure. Michael Doherty,
Present.
myself, David Foreman, President Ron Cabana, Roy Bradley,
Here.
Glenn Lessig,
Here.
Mike Bernardi,
Here.
Jeff Kelleher,
Here.
Dave Richardson,
Here.
Fred Schwab.
Here. Thank you, sir. All right, not necessary to see an alternate, so we'll move on to approve the minutes of the November 13th, 2018 regular meeting. Have a motion for that?
So moved.
Got a motion from Mr. Chamorro
I'll second it.
and a second from Mr. Ford. Discussion.
I have one addition, I just realized, is Fred Schmor's name's missing from the November 13th minutes. He was present.
Yes, he was. Anyone else?
Number 4, says I seconded the discussion on the minutes. The motion. Okay, number 4. And Bernardi seconded. Who did? Mike, I think you. I don't know who did, who mentioned, who seconded the motion. Number 4, it says I seconded the motion.
Well, you already seated, so you
Yeah,
could.
because I did, so I.
Okay.
How'd you do that?
Dave, you made the motion. I think it was Glenn, the second.
Says Ray seconded. All right. I'm not reading the right thing.
No, number 4.
No, you go to the tape.
Why don't you go to the tape?
Yeah, all right, we'll have to check
Well,
the tape.
it'll be difficult for Terry to know based on voices, because we say our names.
No, you would. Yeah, we could recognize
Oh,
it.
thank you. It'll be a lot nicer if you'd be on with it, so you said that.
I seconded it. I remember now.
Thank you.
I think it was Glenn.
Yeah, I think so, too. Thank you, Glenn. Got that? All right, Terry?
Anything else?
Just a little thing on page 3, the third full paragraph, it says, Glenn Lessig inquired about the project. I think that was actually me. Not a big deal, but
Did you correct that?
You can correct that. So it's gonna be Jeff Kelleher inquired about the project.
Any other questions from the board?
You all set, Terry?
Karen,
Speak
you
up.
have,
Yeah,
Mrs. Fitzpatrick has a,
yes, on page 2, item 7, old business, item A. Second sentence where it says the rate that was received is $5,151,842. I didn't specify that that was what was received. I think I said that was we were expecting to get from the state, because I did receive a 25% amount of that. So I just would like, where it says the rate was received, to change that to the amount expected is $5,151,842.
everybody got that? Any further discussion?
I just wanted to make sure that the tape was all set.
Okay.
You find that, Terry? You all set?
All right, just no other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is to approve the minutes of the November 27th special tri-board meeting. I would move to approve. Mr. Portman motions.
Second.
Mr. Lessig seconds. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
Mr. Bradley abstains,
Me too.
and Mr. Cabana abstains. Alrighty, next item is public comment. Michael?
Just for the purpose of recognition, I'd like to introduce the Board of Finance members to our new town council, Attorney Rich Roberts of Halloran and Sage, who's in the back row here, so we're pleased that we got several competitive bids for legal services in the town, and Attorney Roberts has been very responsive. He comes with glowing recommendations, particularly from the town administrator in Putnam. I did go on the air at WINY this morning. I did say that if for some reason it doesn't work out, we're going to blame it on the town of Putnam. So, thank you, Rich, for being here tonight.
No, my pleasure.
Welcome. Is there anything you'd like to say this time?
No, not really.
Okay.
He probably knows this town better than many of the people seated at the table. So, in terms of having grown up in Woodstock and as a graduate of Woodstock Academy.
All right, we'll move on to the audit presentation. We have representatives of Mahoney Sable here,
Where would you like me?
right up in the front.
Stand front and center?
Yeah, off to the side, wherever you feel comfortable is fine.
The camera's gonna run out. Okay, Jeff.
Got it. All right, well, thank you very much. My name is Mike Van Deventer. I'm a partner at Mahoney Sable, and ultimately I was responsible for overseeing the audit and issuing the reports on behalf of the firm. I know previously your engagement partner was Jennifer Hawkins. She did leave the firm back in November to take the position as the town finance director in the town of Killingly. I had previously served as your concurrent partner, so I stepped into the engagement partner. I have tonight a presentation that I will go through, much like Jen has done in the past. It'll provide an overview of the scope of work, some financial highlights. This will take a seat. I'll make our required auditor communications, and certainly to the extent you have questions, please feel free to ask as we go along. If we can jump to slide 1, actually jump to slide 2. In terms of the scope of work, again, we did perform an audit of the town's financial statements. We performed that audit in accordance with both the auditing standards issued by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as the government auditing standards issued by the Government Accountability Office. In addition, based on the level of federal and state expenditures, we did perform a federal and state single audit. We performed the federal single audit in accordance with the Uniform Administrative Requirements and the state single audit in accordance with the State Single Audit Act. In addition, we also perform an agreed upon procedures on the end of school year reports, and those procedures are required by the State of Connecticut Department of Education. So no change in terms of the overall scope of work that we performed over prior years. In terms of reports, we do issue a number of reports in connection with our work. The main report is the report on the financial statements. We will be issuing an unmodified clean opinion on your financial statements. Again, our opinion does provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from a material misstatement, whether due to error or fraud, and that they've been prepared in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. Our opinion does cover multiple statements within your financial statements. For the town, it covers your governmental activities, each of your major funds, which is your general fund, your WPCA fund, your Herbert Bowen fund, and then your town and road fund. In addition, we issue an opinion on your aggregate remaining fund information, and that includes some of your special revenue, your capital projects, permanent private purpose trusts, and agency funds. In addition to the report on the financial statements, we also issue a report on compliance and on internal control over financial reporting. It's important to note here that we're not actually expressing an opinion on your compliance with laws and regulations or on the effectiveness of your internal control. To the extent we identify what we would consider a material non-compliance with a law or regulation or material weakness in your internal control structure, we would include it in this report. And we do not report any such matters. In connection with the federal single audit, we issue a report on compliance and on internal control at the federal award level. So here we are actually expressing an opinion on your compliance with the requirements of your grants. Your total federal awards expended for fiscal year 2018 was about $891,000. Your major programs was the special education cluster as well as the community development block grants. We did issue unmodified clean opinions on compliance, and we did not report any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses over compliance. And again, in terms of compliance testing, the major compliance requirements with these funds is that you're using them for the purpose that you obtained them for. So we do test your expenditures. In connection with the state single audit, we issue a similar report. For fiscal year 2018, the town received a total of $5.9 million in state financial assistance. The majority of that is exempt and not subject to our testing. What was subject to our testing was about $746,000. Your major programs was your Town Aid Road Grant and your local capital improvement program. We did issue an unmodified clean opinion on your compliance over those programs, and there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses identified. All right, so in terms of the overall reporting, it was clean. Any questions in terms of the reports?
Could you just go back for a minute?
Sure.
You said, state federal assistance, $5,995,166 expended, but
Yep.
only $746,812
Is not exempt and subject to our testing.
okay.
Okay, so the state will tell us which programs are exempt from the State Single Audit Act testing. And so the education cost sharing funds, excess cost grants, those sorts of things are not subject to our testing.
So their uses as they comply with those grants, is that what you're saying, are not subject to your testing?
They're not subject to our testing, correct?
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions before I move on to the financial highlights? No? Again, there's a lot of information in the financial statements. I certainly recommend that you read through them, ask questions of management. These highlights are really more geared towards providing you with things that we look at from an audit perspective. In terms of your general fund budgetary highlights, again, your original budget did provide for the use of fund balance in the amount of $351,000 to balance your revenues and expenditures. Your final budget did include a transfer of $110,000 from the prior year budgetary surplus into the capital non-recurring fund. Your actual change in fund balance was an increase of about $182,000. That results in a favorable budgetary variance of about $643,000. Your revenues were approximately $644,000 more than budgeted, really driven by favorable property tax collections and the state aid for education came in higher than what was budgeted. The actual non-education expenditures were about $286,000 less than budgeted, of which $252,000 was authorized to be transferred into the capital non-recurring fund to fund the local bridge project. The actual non-education expenditures were about $30,000 less than budgeted, and that surplus was authorized to be transferred into the Board of Education non-lapsing fund. This next slide goes over your governmental funds highlights. And this includes your general fund on a GAAP basis, as well as all of your special revenue and capital project funds. Your total combined ending fund balances as of year end totaled about $13.6 million, which was an increase of about $1.3 million from the prior year. Your total fund balances consisted of about $4.3 million in your general fund. Again, that increase of about $182,000. Of that amount, $3.5 million is considered unassigned. That does represent 14.4% of your fiscal year 2018 GAAP expenditures and other financing uses. I also included it based on your fiscal year 2019 budgetary expenditure appropriations, and so that amount is about 15.2%. In terms of your WPCA fund, you had a fund balance of about $159,000. That was a decrease of about $38,000 from the prior year. That decrease was really driven by an increase in wastewater treatment charges. We do know that the WPCA was looking into some increases in the charges over the prior year. I don't believe that that has been resolved at this point, so that's something that they're continuing to work on with the town of Putnam. But again, that does reflect an increase in what they were charged from the town of Putnam. In terms of the Herbert Bowen Fund, that has a fund balance of $5.9 million. Again, an increase of about $730,000, which reflects the market gains on investments. That fund had a tremendous return over time. And then your town aid road fund has no fund balance reported due to the nature of the fund. We do have about $515,000 in funding that is available for use under that grant. And then your total other funds had a fund balance of about $3.1 million, which was an increase of about $442,000 from the prior year. That includes about $1.1 in your capital non-recurring fund, about $1 million in your small cities fund. The majority of that represents loans that have been made under the program. You really only have about $4,000 available in that fund to spend. And then you had about $639,000 in your open space fund. But again, the key thing that we look at is you have no funds with any deficit fund balances. Any questions on the governmental fund?
You want to take detailed questions now, or you want to wait for the?
If they relate to this slide, we can talk about them now.
Well, they're about page 21.
Okay.
And the internal service account.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to. Sure, I understand what actually page 22. Just looking at this is the Board of Education Employees Benefits Fund. Looking at these numbers and at the expense report from last year from the Board of Ed. The expense budget was $1,323,000. This would indicate there's $365,000 that was also from the employees that was contributed to the health insurance fund. That means that the total funds available, both from the expense budget and from the employee thing, would have been $1.688 million. And this shows a net, page 23 shows a net cash used of $74,000, or net cash used in operating activities. So if you add all of those up, that's 1.7 million. 1.167 million appears to be what was used to, and that would be for page 22, for operating expenses. So the balance of $595,000 would have been used for stipends, for life insurance.
So,
While premiums and administrative charges do not fall under 1.167 million. It says administrative and claims.
right, so that doesn't, I believe that doesn't include some premiums that you pay as well to diversify for the program. So, in any event, this fund here, this internal service fund, because what we do reconcile the expenditure activity for the insurance that's recognized as an expense in the Board of Education budget. So their budget was $1.3 million, they expensed $1.3 million in their budget, okay? Of that $1.3 million, $685,000 was contributed to pay claims expenditures, the cost of claims expenditures. In addition, they also paid about $451,000 in premiums and administrative charges that are not reflected in this fund. They're just reflected as an expenditure within their budget. Okay, so the piece that goes into the cash account that's maintained at Diversified is shown as a contribution. This activity really captures the activity of that cash account, as opposed to actual invoices that they paid for insurance.
Right, I understand. So you said how much, it was 400,
About 451,000.
451,000 that would not be accounted for here.
Correct. So if you
That
did,
were in premiums and expenses.
Yep.
Through DPJ.
correct. So if, from their budget perspective, you would take the 685 that they contributed into the cash account plus the 451, and then the additional expenses are HSA contributions, life insurance expenses,
Yeah, so that gets it down to about 145,000. Okay, that's a more reasonable.
Right, correct.
Reasonable number. The 595 kind of
Right, exactly.
surprised me a little.
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things we could consider doing is actually reflecting those costs as well in this fund. It doesn't impact anything else in terms of the financial statements. It is reconciled.
Yeah, it doesn't matter going forward because
It
won't
doesn't
be an
exist.
issue.
Yeah.
So it kind of becomes academic.
Yeah.
I have one more question. Because in page 23,
Mhm.
the implication here is that the program itself had a deficit of $74,000 because that had to be drawn from the fund, from the reserve fund, which is what it's there for. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, so there's actually two pieces. So there's the health insurance reserve fund that is maintained by the town. Okay, and I actually broke that out this year on your financial statement. So on page 21, you'll see that balance as being 548,000. So there was no change in that balance from the prior year. Okay, then there's also a reserve that is held at Diversified for paying the cost of claims. And so what would have been drawn down on in terms of that 74,000 would have been from that cash account at Diversified.
Okay, but for full accounting purposes, that's a town account, correct? In terms of asset, because it can't be anything other than a town account, it's not legal to have it.
Right, it's really an escrow account held at the insurance company.
Held at the insurance company, but on whose books does it sit?
We put it on these, we reflect it on this.
On the town's book?
Yes.
Because it's a town account, because it's the only place it can be.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All
So
right.
there's gonna be timing issues with it, with claims incurred but not reported. So that's one of the liabilities that we book, that they don't truly know what that number is as of June 30, it's just an estimate. That's one of the reasons why you would have that reserve account with the insurance, to offset some of those future costs.
Okay, so explain to me why. Well, I can see $42,000 here is an increase in accounts and claims payable. Well, I'm not clear as to why this isn't indicating that the costs accrued in 2018 aren't higher than what was budgeted by just the cost incurred, not counting the claims paid. The increase in accounts and claims payable would be about $32,000 negative. Am I missing something?
No, because it does, this account does accumulate kind of over time. So, some years when the claims come in, they might be higher than what the IBNR was versus less, and so that activity is gonna flow through. So in terms of, what the Board of Ed contributed, the way that I would look at it is as long as they didn't go below that 72,000, meaning there was a deficit, then they really wouldn't have kind of overspent their overall budget.
It's 72,000 or the 42,000?
I'm looking at the 72,000 that is undesignated, that's basically in that reserve account at the insurance company.
Okay, so, and this was after interest, only 71,000. So you're saying that there was no negative?
Well, I mean, on a full accrual basis of accounting, where you're picking up the IBNR, there is a negative.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, oh, okay, there is?
Yes.
All right, so I'm not imagining.
No, no, no.
Oh, all right. Well,
There-
yeah,
Right, but
I'm
there's.
not an accountant, so I get a little slow sometimes.
I attribute that more to a timing issue than anything else. It's very hard to run that number zero on any given year. That's part of the difficulty
Yeah,
with
it's
being
almost
self-insured.
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the reason I know it is that we actually had a negative in the health insurance account. But we had a surplus in the overall budget, which ended up getting transferred to the non-lapsing account. So the question in my mind is why aren't we required to use the surplus to cover the negative before anything is transferred into the non-lapsing account? Because it sort of looks like basically what's been done through 3 or 4 different accounts is money is moved from the reserve account to the non-lapsing account, just through a series of, why isn't that the case?
Well, I assume that would be something that would be requested by the Board of Education. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
but that's not, yeah, I mean, the money that goes into the non-lapsing account is the surplus from the budget. Technically, there was no surplus because we never covered the insurance cost. That's the point I was getting at. There was
Okay.
actually a negative here that was not covered and was pulled out of the reserve. And as a result of that, a surplus occurred in other accounts that ended up getting transferred to a non-lapsing account. So in effect, what happened is you just did this, which is not right. The deficit should have been covered first, and then if there was anything, and it wouldn't have been, because this is greater than, I think it was $30,000 transferred.
Right.
You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that an issue? If it's an issue, it ought to be addressed.
Right.
And this is the time to do it.
Yeah.
Allow. This is the process to do it, not necessarily the time.
Yeah, you do have a number of pieces that are involved here. Obviously, you have the cash account that is held with the insurance company. That is not going to be a perfect match in terms of how you're funding it and how claims are paid. So typically, when people are self-insured, you'll establish an internal service fund because you can't realistically absorb the fluctuation in claims costs with a self-insurance plan. You may have one year where you have a significant surplus, whereas the next year you may have a significant deficit. And so to offset that, you typically have a reserve fund that is recommended by the insurance company based on your claims experience. And that's part of what the cash account with the insurance company is. So from my perspective, the Board of Education would want to make sure that they're funding that to cover their claims. They did have a balance there last year, and so that balance decreased based on the current year's claims, which brought it basically down to the 72,000 that we're looking at.
Right.
So they still had, at June 30, technically a surplus of about 72,000 in the insurance account. That's cumulative over time. So no, you're not looking at just one specific year. So if you instead put that reserve money into the insurance account, this would go up by an additional 30-something thousand. So instead of having the money in the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund, you would have it here.
Yeah, the question is what is required, because the non-lapsing fund is set up to allow a surplus to be moved. But it technically wasn't surplus, because it would have been absorbed plus
Yeah.
$2,000.
Yeah, no, I understand. I
You see
guess
what
it
I'm
would
saying?
depend how the surplus is defined and how these cash accounts are incorporated into the calculation of that surplus.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, so the.
I don't have an answer for that
The
either.
answer is,
Yeah.
well, I think somebody should get an answer to it,
Yeah.
because we did that action.
Yeah. Is that an attorney question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's probably an attorney
Very
question.
good move.
Yeah. No, realistically, it's probably,
I'm just kidding.
yeah. Because that's more compliance with, I guess, with laws and regulations than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would definitely be an attorney question. So from my perspective, from an audit perspective, I don't see that being a compliance issue.
Right, okay. No, it's really a legal issue.
Correct.
About how the money was moved. The reason I walked through this, and I apologize to everybody,
Yeah.
because this is kind of down in the weeds, but,
I
I mean, that's that's what I saw.
Right.
But I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something, but it sounds like I'm not missing something. There is a $32,000 roughly thing here, deficit,
Right.
that was for the period,
Yeah.
not in,
Is it, is the surplus calculated on a modified accrual basis of accounting versus a full accrual basis of accounting? The internal service fund, when we book the IBNR, which has an impact on the gain or loss for the internal service fund, is on a full accrual basis of accounting. Whereas typically those IBNRs would only be booked in your government-wide financial statements, so you wouldn't absorb that into your general fund. So that would also come into play in terms of what your true surplus was on that line item.
Yeah, but we're like 2 steps away from that.
Yeah, yeah. So what I can do is, if you want, I can put together kind of a schedule under the various scenarios in terms of accounting, and that can be proposed to legal.
Well, I think that's what the question is was the move of $30,000 into the non-lapsing account a legitimate move of a surplus, or should it have been first covered the
Right.
expense?
Yep.
That's the question. Welcome.
So the CPA is gonna have to talk to the lawyer,
Yeah,
and we'll figure that one out.
yeah, and I think I remember dealing with about 2/3 of this question during the summer.
Yeah.
The money at the insurance company was not part of what I was looking at.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, that other question is, these are tangential questions, actually.
Right.
Because the other thing is in June, when the other issue came up, we were looking at a $22,000 surplus. And now it looks like we got a $30,000 deficit. Okay, thanks.
But I do definitely think the basis of accounting might come into play in that as well, so we probably have to look at that as well.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna shed any tears
Yeah.
about not having to deal with this going forward.
Right. Right. It is, yep. Difficult, so. Good question. Any other questions? All right, the next slide goes over your government-wide financial highlights. Again, this includes your, all of your governmental funds converted to a full accrual basis of accounting, so it includes all of your capital assets as well as the related debt that you have on those assets. In terms of the overall town, you do have a positive unrestricted net position of about $955,000. I did note here that you do have very low levels of long-term bonded debt. Your debt service represented about 1.7% of your fiscal 2018 budgetary expenditure appropriations. A lot of the municipalities that we audit, that number's anywhere between 5 and 10%. In terms of your Connecticut Municipal Employees Retirement System, the net pension liability that is allocated to the town totals about $1.2 million. That was a decrease of about $239,000 from the prior year. That plan at the state is actually one of the well-funded plans. It's about 91% funded, and the contributions that the town made totaled approximately $229,000. On the next slide, I have a bullet here on other post-employment benefits. So again, the town was required to implement a new accounting standard, GASB statement number 75, accounting and financial reporting for post-employment benefits other than pensions. The implementation of that standard did result in a decrease in your beginning net position of about $533,000. So this reflects the retiree health care benefits for eligible employees of the Board of Education. The state law does allow eligible retirees access to the Board of Education's healthcare plan, provided to the active employees. The actuary will determine liability for those benefits total about $5.2 million. So that now is reflected as a liability on your balance sheet. In addition, there are also pension and other post-employment benefits that are provided to teachers that are borne by the state of Connecticut. The net pension liability and the net OPEB liability attributed to the Board of Education's eligible employees totaled about $16.8 million in terms of the net pension liability and about $4.3 million in terms of the net OPEB liability. Again, these liabilities are currently carried by the state. I know there's been discussion at the state level about pushing some of these costs down on the town. You can see how significant these costs are, and it is truly an issue for the state of Connecticut. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the upcoming years in terms of the budget. Again, the on-behalf payments that were made by the state of Connecticut on behalf of the retirees for your town was about $1.3 million. Any questions as far as the financial highlights? I'll move on to my required communications. Again, these communications are required by our auditing standards. The first bullet here talks about our responsibilities under our auditing standards. Although we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements are the responsibility of management. All the information in the financial statements does come from the town. It's our responsibility to perform our audit procedures and express our opinions on the financial statements. In terms of the plan, scope, and timing of the audit, there were no changes in the scope, and the timing of the work did go as we originally agreed upon. There were some delays in the overall reporting experience. The state actually just released the information that we needed for both the municipal employees retirement plan and the state teachers retirement system last week. So we had incorporated all of that information into these financial statements. In terms of significant audit findings, we do review your accounting policies and practices. The town does not have any unusual accounting policies or practices. Again, I did mention that you were required to implement a new GASB standard, and so you will see some additional note disclosure in the financial statements included in Note 12. Really, we had no significant difficulties encountered in performing the audit. We did have an uncorrected misstatement, which consisted of an understatement of accrued payroll. Is it the Board of Education? Just hourly employees and town employees. So that's something that we've kind of carried forward. It's really a timing issue in terms of paying your hourly employees. There were no disagreements with management. We will be obtaining a management representation letter. There's nothing included in that letter that we're required to inform you of. All of the representations that we will be obtaining are normal in the nature of the audit. We were not aware of any consultations with any other independent accountants. If the town did consult with another accountant, we would have to contact the accountant to make sure that they had all the facts and circumstances. And then in terms of other matters for discussions, I did include in here, I know there's been a lot of discussion about what is the appropriate process for maintaining and utilizing any remaining funds within the town's and Board of Education's health insurance reserve funds. Again, it's not a black and white issue, but ultimately you want to determine what to do with those funds from a board perspective. So certainly welcome any thoughts or feedback that you have on that. If that's a discussion you want to have as well.
Questions, Jim? Anyone? Questions? No, just other matters for discussion. So currently we have a remaining fund balance in the Board of Education Healthy Reserve Fund. It's my understanding that those funds can be used to pay all of hangover costs from the previous self-insured fund. Any monies left from that can be utilized for health insurance costs or returned to the town. Is that correct?
That's how I originally viewed it, yes.
You said originally, so how you?
Well, yes, that's how I view it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question on that point. Actually, it's a complicated, again, I'm sorry, it's a complicated question. Using those, I don't have an issue with using those funds, because frankly, they're no different than general they're funds, they're all fungible. But the issue that comes up is whether those funds can be used in addition to authorized spending. That's where it gets sticky. It gets sticky two ways. One, it's a 10-222 violation. 10-222 says you can't spend more than what's authorized. You can't use more than was authorized regardless of the source. Paraphrasing. Plus the policy says the purpose of the reserve fund is to provide protection in the event claims and expenses negatively affect the town and the Board of Education budgets. That's what the fund was, I mean, that's the last sentence, paragraph 4. That's specifically what that fund was set up for.
What do you mean from the
Fund policy.
okay. Yeah.
So, what got proposed was to use that money to pay insurance premiums, for example, this year, which would be over and above what was authorized in spending, and a violation of the fund policy, because that's not what it was for. It was to cover liabilities on a self-funded program. So I'm not sure how you managed to take money out of that account and pay insurance premiums. It's a violation of the fund policy, and it's a violation of state statute. Oh, plus we have this other little town statute called Proposition 46 that we're already at the limit of, so.
Right. Well, I'm not an attorney, but going along with what you're saying, if it's declared as part of the revenue stream or a decrease in their total requested budget, then it would seem to be appropriate if they use it for insurance purposes.
I'm not sure I understand what you said.
If, as part of the budget process, the Board of Education proposes to use monies that are available in that fund to cover some of their insurance processes, costs, then I think it would be okay. And so at least as far as 10-222.
Not if it requires spending more than what was authorized.
It wouldn't be spending more than it's authorized. Because it would take place before the budget process, the budget would be approved afterwards.
Oh, yeah, as long as,
Okay, we agree.
you go to the maximum of Prop 46, where the money comes from becomes an academic exercise.
Yeah, I just
If
wanted-
it comes from taxes, or it comes from the general fund, or the state, or the gods, whatever, it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
Yeah, no, as long as it's within the authorized spending limit, I don't have an issue with it. I'm just, because essentially, these funds aren't any different than any other funds.
No.
Once the program's closed out. And we've got so much sitting in there. I mean, we're like $300,000 beyond anything that's reasonable. So, in fact, I think the total original target was $550,000. And we're still gonna be at, what, 528? And we're closing the program out.
Right.
So, yeah, as long as you, that's what my whole issue
Yeah,
is.
well, just declared as, I'm not sure, it's probably not revenue, but as an asset used towards the budget. Seems.
Yeah, or anything else, yeah. In fact, why wouldn't we, at the end of fiscal year 2019, simply close out the internal service fund, transfer the funds into the general fund? Any liabilities that happen to come up, insurance related, post July 1st, 2019, would just simply get paid. There would be a town liability anyway, so you just pay it out of the general fund. The internal service account was really just a way of setting money aside, for in case, and to absorb that.
Fluctuation in claims.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter, right? It might,
I agree with you.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that would be up to the boards, to decide.
Any other questions? No one? Well, I guess, yes, Janice?
Can I ask a question of Mike, with regards to the $74,000 negative balance, because you request a confirmation from the insured party and they give you what the balance is on June 30, they're supposed to, if there were any credits that were coming in for any claims or whatever in future weeks, days, that information wouldn't have been given to you because they're asking for a 630 if there's still a claim pending or.
Correct, in terms of like
reimbursement.
stop loss policies and stuff like that.
Correct. So it's 74,000, because you're talking June 30, potentially could be a different situation, but because you are auditing the books as of June 30, that's the number that you have to put in the books on our audit. So
Correct.
it may not necessarily have been a $74,000 deficit on 630, had you been able to go beyond that to get information from DAP.
Correct, that's why, I mean, it's, again, when I talked about the IBNR, the incurred but not reported, it's an estimate. And so the actual amount, the actual cost that's going to be incurred, and typically when they do the IBNR, they'll put a 5% reserve on that number as well, just from a conservative perspective. So to really figure out whether or not there was, an overspend, I guess, you would have to look at all of the data that comes in subsequent to see what the actual claims truly were. Because it could come in, less than that number. It's an estimate.
Thank you.
Good.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, you could, if you'd like to. Make a motion. Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right, next we'll go on to old business, update on the state budget. Have you heard anything there, Michael?
I have not, I don't know if Karen has heard anything, I haven't gotten any updates on the state budget.
No, I haven't, we haven't received any other funding there for yet either, so. No, other than what Pat Boyd mentioned at the tri-board meeting, I haven't heard anything.
I know they have all kinds of meetings planned, but haven't heard any updates myself, so.
There, you did receive the first payment, education
I
funding?
did in October, yes.
So there are no other outstanding obligations at this point? in the
No,
state?
not that I see.
Right, most of the people will be payable this spring.
Yeah, the next payment should come from ECS in January.
Right. But
And
the
then
other
April.
grants are due.
Yeah, some of the other grants will come in, February, we'll get some more Town Aid Road if it's still there. And then Nash and Pequot is usually like 3 payments, different things like that. I get a small amount of in lieu of taxes.
Thank you. All right, there's nothing else under that. We'll move on to our fund balance policy.
I got a question. Karen, can you look at page 7 of the slide presentation?
Can.
So our fund balance policy, the unassigned fund balance is,
Yep.
I believe, 8 to 15%. We've been suspension of that policy since, I think, a year ago, September. So,
Yeah, somewhere right around there. Yep.
so looking at these two numbers, is it, just so I understand, not a municipal budget kind of thinker. So we're still over, it's 15.22, we are still over at this particular moment? Or are we using
I
the
really would,
14.49?
I would go with the 14.49 because that 15.22 is based on the 2019 expenditures that we're in
Projected.
right now.
Right,
Yeah.
projected.
So if you look at page, I think it's page 9 in the actual financial statements,
Yeah.
because, you know, this is just an overview, because that 4 million is not all available.
Yeah, it's at like 14.75 or something.
Yeah, so basically, on page 9, it will kind of further goes down. I like to go by that number.
Okay,
I just have to get to
yeah, they
it.
rounded to 14.8, I think,
Yep.
earlier in the.
If you look at the difference, so we have a unassigned fund balance of 3,587,000. That particular amount can be used for anything. But the total fund balance, that's 4,299,000. Out of that, $712,000 is what's committed to this current fiscal year because it was on our revenue sheet. So we cannot touch that. That's already committed to this current fiscal year to fund it. So I would go by the 14.8 that's represented in that last paragraph.
All right, so my next question is for the Board of Finance. Is there any reason to keep this policy in suspension any longer today? I think our policies say that we review it in July and in December.
That's correct.
And we've gone for well over a year with a
Suspense on the cap.
suspense on the cap. I think at some point you don't have a cap, you raise the cap, you lower the cap, you move the money, or you remove the suspension. So I think we're in compliance. The reason we suspended initially is we weren't in compliance at that time.
We were over, but then we transferred some money out of the general
That's right, we
fund.
moved some out, and then as part of the budget process, we didn't fund part of the budget, hold mill rate down. So my feeling is that we should put it back in place, and we've got all the way till before we have to concern ourselves with it again. So, that being said, I would move that we remove the suspension on the unassigned fund balance policy cap.
Second. Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Ford, Mr. Chamorro seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carried. Alrighty. Next item is update the 2019 meeting calendar. We agreed on our calendar at the last meeting, but in the time that's gone by, there is the good possibility that there'll be a,
Yeah, September 10th of 2019, it's actually a primary.
Primary.
So I was told by our town clerk that if we did have to primary, we can't hold any meetings during that. So she recommended that we change that date. So I moved it to the third Tuesday of September.
which would be 9/17. And that would also work out as well.
More time, because if we did it earlier in the month, it'd be very difficult to present our transfers, and if there's just timing issues with Board of Selectmen having to approve it before we bring it to your approval, so.
So we need a motion to move the date of our September meeting from the 10th to the 17th.
So moved.
All right, Mr. Lessig, motion, second.
I'll second.
Mr. Fortin seconds. Any further discussion?
The only comment is the December 10th meeting. December, yeah. Every year, it runs into the same problem. The audit shows up 3 days before the meeting, which right most of the time. I won't be here going through it next year, but other people might. Yeah, and I know Karen ends up, she gets it on Thursday, and then she's gonna be here tonight. But, and there's a little special circumstances this year, there's special circumstances every year, because this has happened like every year for the last 4 or 5 years.
Should we have a separate motion?
Well, it
Well,
can be
no,
amended.
my question is, if we move the date a week later, would the report just come out a week later?
I would hope not. This year,
I know we hope not,
yeah,
but-
this year the delay
And they know the
was,
date?
yeah, this year was the delay because of the state pension. So it was
I
a
think
few
last
days
year
later than.
they made an attempt to get it to us ahead of time. Draft copies last year.
Shouldn't we vote
Talk
on the
about
current
September.
motion and then?
No,
We can amend it, we can amend it
December.
through discussion.
Thought we were talking about September.
We are talking about September,
talking
but we're
about
adding
December.
December as
We're
well.
adding-
For there's a possible amendment to,
Gotcha.
It was just a discussion.
yeah, it's discussion, correct?
I don't have a problem, but I don't know if the auditors will still just push it off a week later.
I really don't think so, because it's not their fault they pushed it off this year. It was due to, I don't think it was until December 3rd, that Monday, that they actually got their information, because I get that same information from the state sent to me. And then that day, they finished the statements, I got them the next day, sat down with Lauren on Thursday, went over them, and then I forwarded them to everybody. So if we delay it, they're still gonna get it to us in plenty of time to review it, but it depends on when the
Depends on the
state's
state.
information is available. So, yeah, this year I was kind of more, it was more under the gun for us to review these. I don't know about everybody else, but I take them home and I read every single page. And I make sure that I am fully aware of what's going on. If there's questions, it has to go back.
Well, would you favor it if we pushed our meeting back a week?
I really, to be honest with you, I don't really, I mean, it doesn't affect me either way, it will get done. But if it would be something that everybody else feels they need more time to review them and ask more questions before they come in, that's,
Well, Mr. Fortin, would you care to withdraw or amend your motion, or shall we vote on it as
However, it's my motion.
your motion?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I would be glad to amend it to include December 10th to December 17th, if that's what the board would want.
Well, that's what the vote is for.
Well, we'll go any further, let's just make sure that, first of all, everybody be willing to come on the third Tuesday versus the second Tuesday, which we've all got booked in. Secondly, although it's inconvenient, I know that I personally spend some time at 5 o'clock in the morning looking at the audit report and reading it. It's inconvenient. I'd much rather have a hard copy. And I know they made efforts last year, in my opinion, to get us this stuff early, because I was complained about this for a couple times, a couple of years ago. So I can come either day, but I just want to make sure we don't agree to something and it becomes so inconvenient we have 4 attendants that night.
I mean, if anybody needs a hard copy before they come in, I mean, I email them, it's 100 pages, it's a lot. So I don't print 100 pages for every single one of you, I send it via email.
135.
But, okay, 105, I get it.
135.
And then there's also the federal single audit we have to review too. You know, myself and Janice, we have to go through all those numbers and make sure that they're accurate and notify them before. So it is very time consuming, but I have no problem meeting a deadline. And I also have no problem giving you more time. It's whatever your convenience is.
I don't have a problem with that. I'll give it a try, see if they end up with this showing, so I don't have a problem moving that December date.
So that could be either day.
So,
There's one thing that I do want to mention, is that I do believe they have until January 2nd to send these to OPM, and I just wouldn't want it delayed, because if there are questions, there are problems, if something needs to be corrected, we want to make sure that it's done in time for them to submit them to OPM in time. So I don't know if that plays into a factor as well.
That gives them a week, we've got 2 holidays soon after that.
I think we should just leave it as is,
If you're happy with that, I do.
and let's
You're the
just,
one.
exactly. At the end of the day, they're asking me or Janice 90% of all the questions anyway, so I think as long as it's okay with her, if she's good with that time constraint, I think we should just leave it.
So you've not amended your motion.
Why not? So we just leave it stand.
and you did second.
I did.
Okay, you're still
I'm fine with that.
good with that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to change the date of the September 10th meeting to September 17th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Alrighty.
Terry, you can ignore all that talk about December. That's what drop on.
Alright. Update on the local bridge project.
So I'll start talking, and I know that our treasurer will correct me when I make a mistake. But I will say that I think the minutes of the last meeting pretty accurately reflect where we are right now. We did do some research. I think Mr. Richardson suggested we research what the policy was with regard to the CME engineering services. Our policy that we do have provides for an exception for if it's approved by a majority vote of the Board of Selectmen to use an engineering firm and not necessarily bid out again for that engineering firm. In our particular case, we think that CME has been a resource that has been involved in the bridge work for many, many years, has kept the the bridges available and on the local bridge program, has provided guidance to previous selectmen in terms of the prioritization of the bridges. I think it would be prudent as a board for the board to continue to use CME, but we do need to vote on that at a Board of Selectmen meeting, and I think that will help address the issue that Mr. Richardson raised, to make sure that we're fully compliant and we're not violating our own policies. So we did have some discussion and some give and take between the highway foreman, Karen, myself, and CME about other bridges that we might want to add to the mix. There are no shortages of bridges. It got clouded a little bit because we got a new bridge report for a bridge, the Kenyonville Road Bridge, and the state evaluated that as poor. And that information was shared with CME, and CME said, well, part of the classification of that bridge is before, but the bridge itself isn't on an overall basis for, only part of the bridge is, and they thought it was something that didn't rise to the standard of what we're trying to do. So I think for the sense of expediency, we would like to go forward with the 4 bridges that we've identified, which again are Peak Brook, Hopkins, Butts, and Lower County Road. We think that that is gonna provide ample opportunity for this town to spend a significant amount of money, hopefully well reimbursed by the state through the local bridge program. So, the figures that were provided still remain, generally accurate. Peak Brook and Hopkins would be through the local bridge program, and we would hope at the next opportunity to add Butts Bridge to that mix as well, using CME. So, I guess right now, I think we were talking about, Karen, earlier today, that we need to get the right language from CME and provide that information to Doug Gillette.
Yes, our bond counsel. But I think what we need to do is we need to come up with an actual up-to figure that we can present to the board so that we'll have your approval to move forward, because this is something that definitely has to get, to a referendum, and we can't do anything until we get it passed. We can't even get the engineering done, so.
And our engineering folks are really looking for that funding sooner rather than later. We know that we have 2 additional items that we would like to bring up at town meeting. One of them is, I think, Donna Aletta is going to talk about open space, which is an issue that the Board of Selectmen are strongly in support of. We would like to couple any town meeting for open space with this, and we also have Witches Woods ordinance that we want to address as well. So we're just trying to be efficient.
Is it a good time to ask you a question, or? Okay. So I was thinking about this today, I made some notes to myself. The engineering costs, I remember the engineers were upstairs and we were talking to them. Do you have any kind of estimate what that is?
The engineering?
Yes, the engineering aspect of it?
It was about 320,000.
So, is it sensible in any way to consider doing this in 2 steps? I don't have the answer here, I'm just thinking of offering an option. We have 15% in our unassigned general fund. 1% of that is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of around 240. The number moves, but it's somewhere around $242,000, I believe, based on my calculation. If we reduced our fund balance by 1%, and move that money into, or allocated that towards the bridge project, are we getting close to the point where we could fund the engineering while the rest of this stuff plays out?
Well, it doesn't matter, Dave, because no matter what, it's over 100,000. Our ordinance says we have to go to a referendum.
Well, I'm not trying to avoid the referendum.
No, but I'm saying we can't spend anything until we go to a referendum. So whether you transfer money in from the fund balance or not, we still have to get committed by the townspeople to move forward.
I'm saying you could go to referendum just to transfer the money to be utilized for that, and you go to referendum again when we have a final vote. That's what I'm saying, doing it in 2
I
steps
wouldn't recommend
versus 1.
having 2 referendums. And
I think we'd be better off just setting a cap
I think so too.
and doing a single referendum, and we could not exceed whatever cost was set. And I think that we have a pretty good idea, the ballpark figure of where we're at, and that is somewhere
About
2.5 million.
Yeah, about 2.5, because when we talked to Ryan, in that meeting, he mentioned that by the time we actually get going with this, he sees about a 30% increase. So the longer we keep delaying this, the more cost to the town. So it would, to me, it would make sense that we asked for money to be transferred into a CNR project of local bridge project phase 1. We gave, a list of 4 bridges. We've had narratives drawn up. We have engineering drawn up on that. Those 4 bridges alone, I predict at least 2 to 3 years to get those done before we can even start another project. So I would, my recommendation would be let's come up with an amount that we can agree upon not to spend over, and then let the town bond council do up a resolution and get it to a town meeting so we can get it voted on. We can't do anything, no one would want to work with us if we don't even have a commitment.
And I think what that also allows us to do is it allows, we have this Butts Bridge Road, which is estimated about $678,000, which is not in the local bridge program, which is a 48% reimbursement. So us getting the funding and committing to CME essentially allows us to say to them, continue your efforts to include this in the local bridge program to help us secure that reimbursement potential for, almost $350,000.
And I personally don't think at this time it would really benefit to have to take money out of the general fund. I would really recommend not touching it. And at this point, because we should wait and see what this fiscal year leaves us at the end, and we can always start a phase 2 and put money into capital project account for that, for down the road. That would be my recommendation.
Just bringing up alternatives. I'm
Nope,
looking for ways to lower, our debt service wherever I can, or we can, I should say. It's not me, the group is, but, so it's just an idea. Keep things going, pay for the engineering when they come up with a final number, or to bring the scope of the number more in focus.
We do not, if I'm not mistaken, we do not have to pay CME $320,000 upfront. We just have to give them a deposit for them to get started. And I think with the timing, by the time, I would say over the next 2 months, by the time we get all of this organized and for referendum, the deposit should suffice for the remainder of this fiscal year. We can look at other ways of funding it in the new budget, if there's money, if there's a surplus, maybe not put it back to the general fund. We can put more money towards the project that way.
Okay, thank you.
I think the best move is to approve an amount for the Board of Selectmen to go forward with to get all this town meeting requirements set up.
Well, so what do we got for numbers?
Well, we were talking about a cap of 2.5 million.
Yeah, because I think as it stands right now, with the current quote, was it 1.8 or 1.7?
I had written down 2 to 2.1 million.
I think it was 1.8, and there was a contingency.
Yeah,
and
and
there
then a
was expected
contingency, and then they
cost
said,
at $20, if I remember right.
and then they said a possible 30% increase we should think about. So we came up with close to 2.5h million.
Because we set a cap doesn't mean we have to spend it.
We don't have to spend it, exactly, that's just,
That's the important part.
It just means we can't spend more than that. And
and we are gonna get some
eventually we will be
reimbursement,
getting,
yes.
hopefully, all around a 48% reimbursement.
48.05.
So I think that's what we need to do is to
Yeah, I think it was
allow-
2.3, and we thought we should go to 2.5.
Yeah. But to give our support to the selectmen to go ahead and move forward with this. So, if someone would like to make a motion to that effect.
I'm trying to figure out how to word it.
Yeah, well, motion to look at just to give them permission to go ahead.
We would recommend.
We would recommend,
I think that the Board of Finance should recommend a
Correct.
specific amount not to exceed 2.5 million. Maybe that could be the wording, I don't know, that the Board of Finance recommends that the Board of Selectmen seek financing up to 2.5 million
Right.
for local bridge project phase 1, or something of that nature.
Sounds good.
I'm trying to think of it as I'm sitting here, but, I don't know, I
All right,
don't
so
normally make
the
motions.
Board of Finance would recommend that the Board of Selectmen seek the approval of the townspeople to spend an amount not to exceed $2.5 million to cover the cost of Bridge Project Phase 1.
Terry, you have that?
I'm working at it.
You let me know when you have that. And then we'll read it back. And
Well, as far as I got, Board of Finance recommends Board of Selectmen to seek approval of townspeople for amount not to exceed 2.5 million.
For the local bridge project phase 1.
So I will make that a motion.
all right, well, I'll second that.
Any discussion, gentlemen?
Do we need to mention it's for bond anticipation notes, or does it just?
No, that's,
The town council will put all that in their resolution to go to town meeting.
any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, moving on. Board of Ed quarterly reports for July through September and fiscal 17 transfers. There were some questions on that. Mr. Richardson, would you like to?
Yeah, I would. First, I'd like to say, Mr. Thurlow, I don't know if you want me to call you Janice or Mrs. Thurlow.
Call me Janice is fine.
Okay, Janice. First, I want to say thank you. I appreciated you responding to the questions and getting us written answers to the questions. Having said that, it appears that the superintendent and the chair of the Board of Ed and the former business manager didn't let you know that they were actually sitting here during the June 12th meeting. I'm referring to the number one question. It wasn't like the Board of Finance had this letter from the 11th and we're just, the 11th of May, and we're just operating in the dark. Those other three people were sitting here. You can see the minutes of the meeting, and you can, there is no video of that meeting, but there is an audio of the meeting. If anybody would like it, I have copies of it here. In the September meeting, it's not on video either, if you want it. So we weren't, I mean, if there was new information, there was plenty of opportunity to present it that night. So there was, in fact, a $250,000 flop in 24 hours, going from $169,000 deficit to a $64,000 surplus overnight. And the real problem with that, as I see it, is that we have to be able to depend on the information we're given. There was actions that were proposed that night to be taken to cover this $169,000 deficit. That would have been a violation of state statute. And, you know, when I mentioned this at the November meeting, people said, well, we never heard that. I had showed Karen an email, and I didn't realize that you guys hadn't seen this. That was the email that I handed out to you today. If you look on page 2, item 3, Connecticut General Statute that has been appropriated. I mean, we've only talked about that like 500 times. That's pretty much verbatim out of the statute. And what was being proposed that night was to take money from a reserve fund and spend it on items that weren't related even to the insurance fund. They would have to cover a general deficit. That would have been a significant problem. Plus, it would have been a violation of Prop 46 because we would have violated that cap as well. So it was a big deal to have this happen. Fortunately, none of those actions had to be taken because voila, 24 hours later, all the money and more showed up. So the problem was taken care of. But somehow there's got to be a whole lot better communications and coordination between the Board of Education and the Board of Finance. And this may not be the best way of putting it, but this game of hide and seek is a real problem. We've got to be able to depend on the information that we're being given.
Yes, Mr. Toth.
I just wanted to clarify that, yes, when we came to the June meeting, we did have, we gave you our worst case scenario based on what we knew. There was a lot of cramming before the Board of Education that week, in which Ms. Monroe and I were compiling all the numbers for our next projection. And things did come out in our favor, but there was no intent of deceiving anyone. We were just trying to prepare in the worst case scenario what could happen, because we don't want anyone to be caught with their pants down. So there was no intent to mislead. The projection wasn't done until the day of that board meeting. It's a very complicated process, and I agree it could be done a little faster. And working with Janice in the future, we hope to speed that process up. But again, I hope that the implication isn't here that we tried to deceive, because that's not what we tried to do there. We were just trying to be open, let you know what we felt could happen, and it did work out well. And it is volatile, especially with special education. We just found out about a special education student that DCF gave us just today. An incredible cost, so it is very volatile. But again, I hope you really don't believe that we're trying to do hide and seek. If that's what you're implying, it's unfortunate, but that's where we are. So.
Well, frequently it has been difficult to get information, and I don't want to say it's we get lied to, but omission of information is just as big a problem. There was actions taken that night, and if you want to listen to the audio from that meeting, I mean, I warned 14 times during that meeting what was being done would have been illegal, and yet we went ahead and did it. That could have been a big problem. So this kind of stuff can't happen. One of the other questions on here was about the $50,000, $53,000 surplus in the unemployment account. I understand your response to this. The problem is that the FICA taxable expenses that were budgeted and what actually happened were within 0.3%. So it wasn't like there was a bunch of layoffs that were planned that then didn't happen. The expenses were right on what was budgeted. And yet, we had this kind of glaring $50,000 surplus sitting in the unemployment insurance account. And that's $53,000, not $63,000. So it's, most of the fund. That's a reason why, as I suggested at our other meeting, that when we get the budget in March for the next year, I mean, we need to be able to see on the 10 account, the basic account level, we need to be able to see the 2018 actual expenses, the 2019 budget, and then the 2020 proposed budget. Like, column A, B, and C. So with these kinds of things, that should have stuck out, but nobody saw it. Unless you went through the town account by account, you wouldn't know it. And we need to be able to see that. We haven't been seeing that lately. And I think everybody agreed on it in November, that that's the way we needed to see it when that budget's proposed. And the other two questions, thank you. That was the information that I was looking for.
Also, if I may. The response in number 4 in the letter, I kind of see it as non-responsive because it's an assumption. It's not based on any information other than assumptions, so I don't see it responsive to our concerns. However, it does raise another issue. It mentions there was a salary market survey for similar positions, and as a result of this, a salary adjustment was made. And my question is, was that made prior to the decision of the other business manager to retire? Was she compensated after a raise based on this salary market survey? Or is that simply something that Janice now enjoys the benefit of?
No, that was something that I, the fall of last year, decided to make an adjustment to the business manager's salary. And in fairness to her, because I felt that the work that she was doing comparatively was worth that amount. So it was something we were also going to budget for to attract a quality business manager in the spring. So it wasn't done to anything else but to just compensate Ms. Monroe appropriately.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions on the quarterly report that you got last meeting? Yep. Janice, I'd just like to say, going forward, we are looking forward to working with you. And I appreciate how upfront you've been with us to this point, and the fact that you got back to us as quickly as you did on those questions.
And some of them were vague because that was prior to me being.
Correct, and that's understood. Things that happened in the past, you cannot be held accountable on any level for those, and believe me, we don't take it that way.
Thank you.
We like to start with a nice clean slate and all work well together.
Thank you. I'd like you to.
All righty.
If anybody wants copies of those meetings from June and September, feel free.
Okay, now we'll go on to new business. Open space request.
Thank you. Dawn Adeletta, Chair of the Open Space Land Acquisition and Farmland Preservation Committee. I believe you all have the letter that I wrote to Mr. Dougherty last week. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Everybody's seen it? Okay. And so I'm here seeking your oft-promised assistance. That if I came to you with a project, you would figure out a way to help make it work. For the people who are in the audience, the Department of Agriculture contacted me last week and asked if Woodstock would be willing to pay for appraisals in lieu of the 25% of the purchase of development rights that Woodstock has traditionally been doing. I explained how our open space acquisition fund works and that we had discussed this with the Department of Ag in the past, that it was actually costing our acquisition fund to budget for surveys that they changed their mind about us needing. And they said, no, you don't understand. This is in lieu of PDR, not in addition. which would mean up to $11,000 versus somewhere between $165,000 and $175,000. So I said, I'll get back to you. Went to Karen first, then the Board of Selectmen, and with the Board of Selectmen's strong recommendation that we go forward with this, I'm here now to seek your guidance and assistance. Lots of questions. I'll ask Mr. Dougherty to choose who goes first.
Go ahead, Dan. I was struggling to understand, forgive me.
Yeah.
I was struggling to understand the sentence.
Okay,
This is a significant town funds, that
Yes.
part I understand. The
okay,
estimated cost, if we paid the 25%, would be
Yeah.
between $175,000 and $190,000.
yep,
So I was understanding that as being, you're looking at a specific purchase right now.
correct,
The 25% of that is around 170, 190, is that true?
correct.
Okay.
If
If we do some appraisals,
Right,
we won't have to pay 25% of what you've negotiated.
we haven't negotiated
Hasn't been
yet.
negotiated.
We haven't, that's what the appraisals are about.
So is this an unnamed project, or?
No, it is a specific
Okay.
project. It's a specific project, which I can't tell you the owners of.
I understand.
Okay. But what happens is, the landowner fills out forms, sends the forms to Hartford, they go through all the stuff. They then start working with the landowner about where they want, which lands they want to protect, where they want to cut out, building lots, if they want to, whatever they want to do. Once that's agreed to, then the appraisers come in, determine the value of the development rights, and then the offer is made to the owner as to whether or not to accept that offer.
And of that offer,
Of that offer, we'll just say $100,000, because it's easy to
Yep.
talk real numbers. If they say it's $100,000, over the past 4 projects, the town has paid $25,000. So we've paid 25% of that total offer of the PDR, of the purchase of development rights cost. This time, they're saying if you will take the surveys, if you'll pay for the surveys instead, we won't ask you to pay for the 25%. They're doing, one of the reasons they're doing this is because they have federally dedicated funds, NRCS funds, Natural Resource Conservation Service funds, and they're trying to spend them down before they go away. So if they purchase for the whole $100,000, they can submit that $100,000 and get more back from the feds than if they did less. And because this particular project is sizable, it's worth their trouble to say, if you guys pay for the survey, which won't impact their total bottom line, we'll waive the 25%. They've
Okay.
done this with a couple of other projects in the past, which is what has permitted that open space acquisition fund to grow as nicely as it has.
all right. So if you were, so your ballpark is what, about, you're looking at
It's based-
$800,000, $700,000 a piece of property?
No, an $800,000 PDR cost, development right cost.
Okay.
And
Okay.
again, that's a very rough estimate based on past prices that DOAG has paid for local land for the development rights.
So in our audit report, it says we have $638,000.
Yes, but that amount was based at the end of the fiscal year. Since then, we have spent an additional $134,172 on the Valley Side Farm, our 25% of that purchase. So we're down to about $505,172.
So you're really looking for our help to just try to maintain your balances? as best you
Well,
can?
no, the problem comes from the way the ordinance is written, in that nice bank account may only be used for the direct purchase of land or easements of the land. It can't be used for associated costs. That's why we always had that separate line item that we've tried to put money in for these
Okay.
appraisals.
And we told you to keep come back.
You sure did.
Okay, then, all right, hit it out.
Right.
I'm all for
Exactly
it.
right. About a year ago, we had this conversation, and we said, oh, don't worry about it.
Come back and see us.
Come back, we'll support you, so.
So.
I just wanna understand what
Right.
we're doing here.
So, you know, Karen suggested that you might look at CNR money. I'm going to leave it to you to see if you can figure out how to make this work.
I would think we wanna use our contingency fund.
Well, that was one of my ideas also, but I think right now, to get this rolling, again, like the bridge project idea, there are some time constraints because they have to get this done before we're even through half of our next fiscal year, so we've gotta make sure that, you know, the money is available, because they have, I believe it's till December to.
The state wants to be able to wrap everything up by December 2019, so they would like us to be able to hire an appraiser, 2 appraisers in February, March, so that that work can be done. They can then continue to negotiate with the owners, do the survey, and wrap everything up by the end of the year, again, so that they can continue to leverage state funds against federal funds.
So I think what we need to do basically is to support the idea, put it to the selectmen to add to their agenda for the town meeting. And then after that, we can decide where we're gonna take the money from.
Well, what do you even have to do?
You don't have to go to a town.
You can just give me $11,000.
Yeah, you don't have to go to a town meeting unless it's
No,
voted for CNR.
but they're gonna have it
That's why I said.
on the agenda because it's something that they have to propose that they might get involved in this purchase.
But not
No,
No.
no, when we.
So it doesn't, you don't have to,
No.
If we put it into the, if we take it out of CNR, in order for them to expend it, it has to go to a town meeting.
right.
If you take it out of your contingency fund, you don't have to do anything because it's under 20,000, it's under 100,000, you can just give them permission.
Right, okay.
When we were using our operating costs, we didn't have to go to town meeting
Okay.
because that had already been an approved expense and we
Right.
chose how to spend it.
Is it,
The acquisition fund always
this
needs.
is not a done deal by any means.
No, no.
No, and
The
no,
owner,
it's
the owner could look at this appraisal and
You're
say,
right.
No.
no.
You're right, and I want to be
Go
very,
away.
I want to be very clear on that, that
Yeah.
this is a gamble, but it's a gamble that, it's $150,000.
So that's where the question comes in, if we
Right.
decide to go with the, if we decide to take it out of our contingency fund, it's spent.
Yes.
The reason I suggested CNR is because we already know that we're gonna have some deficits in some of our departments this year. Mainly one is the transfer station, it could be as close to 30,000, not 100% sure. Open space is capital project, so to me, it would make sense to take it out of the CNR. Save your contingency for now, because you may need to dip into that later as well.
That's the question.
That was why I recommended CNR, but that's just my recommendation, so.
One question I have,
thought if you were under $20,000, you don't need to go to a town meeting. I think it's over $20,000.
For CNR, it could be $1, and you have, it's a state
Oh,
statute.
yeah.
If you go to CNR.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's
But
okay.
does it have to go to referendum or just a town vote?
Just town meeting.
Town meeting.
If it's
Yeah.
over 100,000,
Right.
Then it goes to
Then it goes to
referendum.
So
Sure.
so at the
Referendum.
town meeting, that will be, that will go to referendum for the big thing, we could actually have a vote that night for this smaller item.
yes.
Yes.
Mike, okay.
Yes.
Okay. There was a, yes, sir.
yes, is this agreement with Department of Agriculture in writing?
I have made it very clear in emails going back and forth that this is in lieu of the 25%, and everybody keeps writing back, yes, let us know when you get the vote to.
I'm just concerned, given the
I'm
new
con-
administration,
I'm-
new Commissioner of Agriculture, that they may say, well,
You know,
we don't really have the money, so you still gotta cough up the 25%.
they do have, I can't guarantee them any more than I could guarantee to them that you would approve or that the town voters would approve. All I can be is the messenger and say what they've asked me, and in good faith, I'm asking you. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never had DOAG go back on a deal. If anything, they've sweetened it like this. And that's with 3 different commissioners and 2 different farmland preservation department chairs.
And there are other projects that Open Space has gone forward with, that we paid for the assessment, or paid for the.
Appraisal.
Right, paid for the appraisal that we've then gone ahead and paid our 25% for.
On top.
Because
On
it's
top.
something that's of value to our community. So at this point, we're just paying for the appraisal right now up front, but the money hasn't been allocated in past budgets to allow open space to be able to utilize the raised surface. So I would move that we take $11,000 from our CNR account for the appraisal for this project.
Two appraisals.
Cover two appraisal.
I'll second it.
All right, we have, Mr. Lessig made a motion. You have the motion? And Mr. Cabana, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, motion
Thank you,
carries.
thank you, gentlemen. I'll keep you posted.
Okay. All right. Next thing on the agenda is the audit service agreement. This was the last year of our contract with Malone and Sable. They have given us a proposal to continue for 2 more years. Would be an increase.
That was my question, what are we paying for this fiscal year's audit?
Our
The
share.
last fiscal, yeah, the last.
Yeah,
fiscal
okay,
year.
so, altogether, our share, I think it's like 26,700, and I think the Board of Ed was like 10,000, I don't have it, I'll with me, like 10,200, 10,300. But they've only gone up for the next 2 years, $500 a year.
$500 per year.
So the 38.5 for the 19 is only $500 increase over fiscal
Yes.
14? Okay.
Yep,
And then they're doing another 500.
Right.
Thank you.
So after our presentation this evening, and over the last few years,
I thought Mr. Devons did a very good job. And it was very easy to follow.
I think so, and I think even considering what they had to deal with the state to get final information so that they could provide the information to us, I think they did a good job. And I know that Karen and Linda both were happy working with them, and I believe the Board of Ed as well. So the idea would be to continue their services for the next 2 years till we get through all of this, getting our bridge funding set up and getting some of the other issues squared away. And then after that, we could put out a request for proposals for a new contract. So we'd just be extending their contract for 2 years.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have Mr. Bradford moved, seconded by Fred. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All righty, public comment. Michael?
After the tri-board meeting, we moved at last week's Board of Selectmen meeting to hire Halloran and Sage and Rich Roberts as the town attorney. And if you remember, at the tri-board meeting, we had a lot of discussion that came out, and there was some discussion brought forward by the Board of Education in terms of possible opportunities to explore some type of expanded role of the Woodstock educational facilities. You know, and it's been some time since, I think it might be prudent now with the new town council in place for us to have a meeting to review what is permissible under Prop 46 and what may not be permissible under Prop 46. So I haven't quite figured out how to do that in terms of the structure, or whether that's something where the chair of the Board of Education, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen get together with the town attorney to raise the issue, but I think we need to have that dialogue. I think we owe that, to, the taxpayers of the town as we try to wrestle with some of the things that we heard at that meeting, particularly some of the anticipated expenses that we're gonna be dealing with. So, you know, we now have that council, and I think we need to move forward with that somehow, so. I just wanna throw that out there.
Well, I'm in favor of that. I think probably, we're expecting our first budget presentation in March, so prior to that, we should get together. Maybe if that's something,
We'll work on that.
you could work that out with,
We'll work
with
on
the town council, and we'll set something up whom he feels is the best group who should be included in that conversation, and of course, all the principals, without a doubt. But if, you know, want to expand it a little bit, but I think that's something that we should,
It should be a tri-board meeting.
could
I don't
be.
know who wants to be the host, but I mean, I think it's,
Well, it is a town ordinance, so that would fall under the, yes.
You know, I suggest that, you know, like just the chairman, talk with the town council, just figure out the lay of the land. Because much bigger than dealing with the boards is gonna be dealing with the townspeople. There's 40 years of precedence. There are, I guess there's at least 10 opinions, detailed opinions on Prop 46 that I've been through. So if there was to be any kind of significant change whatsoever, you're gonna go to the townspeople, or they're gonna come here with pitchforks, feathers, and some tar. So, I mean, let's face it, the last time this thing went to referendum, the last 5 times it went to referendum, 70% refused to change it or repeal it. So monkeying with this is gonna be tough.
I don't think they were talking about amending it at this point.
There were
I
two-
think the
there were
impression
two
I got
times.
was just asking questions about
I
what
know
may be.
how they interpret it.
Right.
There's 40 years of precedence on how it's been interpreted.
I think your point's
That's
a
a
good
little
one.
delicate.
I think your point's a good one, that it be the 3 chairs to get started, then once they do, then they can proceed, but, yeah.
You got 20 people in a room.
You're not gonna accomplish a lot in a short period of time.
You're not gonna accomplish anything in a long period of time, just look at hard.
Michael, would you be willing to,
We'll be willing to host it, and, yeah, we'll figure that out.
if you
We'll
can,
work-
you work something out date-wise with
Yep.
the, Megan?
Just to chime in, of course, the Board of Education would be more than happy to be part of the discussion. With myself
Oh, yeah,
as chair
absolutely.
And other principals. So I know it goes without saying, but I wanted it said.
All right, so you'll work on that?
We will.
Very good. Any other public comment? Preston?
Just back to the Board of Ed and that meeting, it was clear that meeting, that there was no hedge words used, that they were up against a deficit, so you can listen to the tape, but that the word, we were up against it, or, you know, hedging words was not used on it. The other comment I'd like to make is it's really strange that we keep buying up land, open space, and our P and Z is gonna take the zoning from, what, 1 1/4 acres down to 1 acre, so that in the space remaining, we can cram more people. Or maybe it just raises the price of the land, but it just seems sort of counterintuitive.
Anyone else? All right, Other from the board?
I would just like to thank Karen, Linda, Janice, and Karen. Clean audit, I think I heard tonight.
Yep.
Thank you for good work, and thank
Good
Karen.
job.
For your victory.
Thank you.
I second that, thank you. I know there's a lot of work that goes into that. From your side, so thank you. At the close of our last meeting, we had quite a bit of conversation about comparing costs between our pre-K students and our Woodstock Academy students. And I just did a little quick spreadsheet that I'll pass out tonight, just for your information. We can talk about it, add to it, et cetera, next meeting if you'd like, but I'll just give you a copy now, and we'll put it on the agenda for next month.
Okay, very good. Anything else from the board? Okay, correspondence and announcements. Okay, our next meeting will be January the 8th.
Somebody get through.
I was waiting for you.
And that's basically all I have, except that, again, I want to thank Linda, Karen, and Sterlo for a good job. Nice outcome on the audit. Thank everybody for coming here and staying for one of our longer meetings. And before we adjourn, I'd like to wish you all a Merry Christmas. And if I don't see you between now and then, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Nobody else wants to leave. All those in favor?
Everybody else walk out the door?
Yeah.